I am generally an advocate for higher density in the central city. This is a necessary planning objective given the huge influx of population and employment to the city of Dallas in order to avoid the specter of continued suburban sprawl and to meet the expectations and the interest in younger generations in living close in to the city center. However, that general philosophy favoring density has to be qualified. It has to be qualified by where higher density is appropriate and where existing city infrastructure can support it. And MF2 zoning is not just an abstract number in our zoning ordinance for this neighborhood. It is the touchstone of their plans and their vision for this neighborhood. Why is that, you may ask? Well, that was set by the Oaklawn Plan 30 years ago. Now, generally, we pay less attention to plans that have been around for 30 years in the expectation that they're no longer relevant, that they don't reflect the current development conditions in the city. But I believe that the Oaklawn Plan is an exception and that it is still a vital, relevant document. That document provided that there were the following objectives. There were 7 objectives, 2 of which I wish to remind you of from page 16.6 of the staff's report that supports their recommendation. 5, to use existing zone development densities as a base from which to plan, while providing bonuses to encourage residential development in commercial areas. And 6, to discourage variances or zoning changes which would erode the quantity or quality of single-family neighborhoods or would fail to adhere to the standards for multiple family neighborhoods and commercial areas. The Oaklawn Committee was established in the mid-'80s after the adoption and because of the adoption of the Oaklawn Plan and the Oaklawn Special Purpose District. And that origin is very important to consider when assessing the credibility of the recommendation of the Oaklawn Committee today. Its purpose was to see that the Oaklawn Plan was followed. The Oaklawn Plan provided for MF2 densities all along Carlisle Street, including the subject property. It is I've come to learn in the last few months that that is particularly important to the neighborhood as a ground principle, because they are concerned that if this property is given a higher density zoning category, it will lead like a row of dominoes falling all up Carlisle Street with other properties that are subject to be redeveloped with even higher densities if we approve this one. I think that would be terribly undesirable because it would violate the conditions, the objectives of the Oaklawn Plan that I have just referred to. It would completely change the nature of this neighborhood. Therefore, I think it's a priority to preserve MF2 zoning. Now, the idea has been discussed here that we might consider higher densities in consideration of the Affordable Housing Ordinance and what kind of incentives that would provide for affordable housing. I think that would be an appropriate approach in that it would preserve the MF2 zoning, at the same time allow somewhat higher densities, and ensuring that the new development had a requisite proportion of affordable housing units. They have been the guardians of the Oaklawn area and PD 193 for over 30 years, and they have steadfastly worked to preserve the objectives of the Oaklawn Special Purpose District, at the same time doing it reasonably to accommodate reasonable changes proposed by developers. And I have seen them support other projects in different locations where higher density was requested by the developer. And so they are definitely not a community group that resists all development. That can't be said of the Oak Lawn Committee. And so therefore, I take it very seriously when they determine that a project is just not right for the location at which it is proposed.
I do want to clarify a little bit on the OLC. I've been going for 2.5 years now, and I hear the debate. And I stayed around this time for the vote and the discussion. And I stayed in the back in case it started flying, so I had an exit just in case.
We're glad to see you made it out
But
safe.
kind of the procedure was the chair asked for a motion was made, and then just like we did around here, everyone who wanted to give their reason for support got to say their reason for support. And it was just like, is anybody else? Yes, yeah. And there was no time limit, there was nothing. Then they asked for the opposition opposition to this, and they all spoke. And what I was incredibly impressed with, and I don't think this was necessarily the case in other issues, is just like what I've preached to everyone I talk to, which we all preach to here, make it a land use. And what I heard was rational land uses. 95% of what I heard was rational land uses. And I think that is kind of what has now turned this. And that's going to be my rational land use.
The PD 193, when you read the fundamental objectives, it makes it crystal clear that just a primary objective was to protect these enclaves of MF2 zoning, that it not only says that you should encourage but incentivize upzoning and more density away from the MF2 areas and into the commercial areas, and that we should not be allowing variances and upzoning that would erode the standards of MF2.
The Oak Lawn Committee is not your average neighborhood group. The Oak Lawn Committee grew out of an earlier group called the Oak Lawn Forum, which in essence, in the early 80s, got together as private parties and devised the Oak Lawn Plan. That doesn't seem all that remarkable in 2018, but it was astounding in 1983 when the plan was adopted. In that age, planning consisted of neighborhoods coming down to City Hall and being told predetermined decisions about their future from the city fathers, and I use that word advisedly. It was revolutionary, and out of it grew a belief, once the plan was adopted, that it needed a guardian, a monitor. And the Oak Lawn Committee was formed. It is not a committee merely composed of single-family property owners or residents. It is a committee with a mixture of stakeholders, some of whom have a residential stake, others of whom have a property development stake, and has served that function well for 35 years. The Oak Lawn Plan is very clear that MF2 areas are to be preserved so as to preserve their character, and density is to be carefully directed.